want to ask you about your video.
But this time I feel it, and I can't deny that the fact that you like me right now. You like me. Thank you.
Yeah.
Which really enjoyed, and I want to ask you about it because I haven't really seen work like that from you. Like I'm really familiar with your previous work, which is more nostalgic, based in nostalgia, found photographs. And how did you choose those speeches, first of all? Like how did you select those?
I was invited to be in this show, and sometimes when you're invited to be in a show like this one, it's nice to be able to sort of think about a piece, like for like the idea of of sea change, the idea of that it's an SFArtsED show, and I was a teacher. We were both teachers. I was watching an award show with my kid, with my younger son, and it was I think it was the Grammys, and he started kind of making fun of the speeches, and he started kind of doing them in a way, like he was like sort of miming the speeches. And this was after I was invited to be in this show, and I was like, it just sort of hit me like it would be so great to do. First I thought he should do the speeches, like he should perform speeches, and he's not really an actor. And then I'm thinking, well, SFArtsED has like this amazing group of actors, basically.
Yeah, they do.
And I was so that was like the little kernel of like developing like some idea for this piece. And I had actually worked with Wyatt, my son, on another piece earlier. So I had an idea of like how to think about a video with kids. The videos, the speeches themselves, I was certainly interested in like the kind of the platform that actors and directors often use to sort of promote or champion kind of political causes.
Absolutely.
And it always seemed like that's kind of what Wyatt was making fun of a little bit. And like there is something about kind of like a false prophet kind of scenario.
Yes.
Like like the kind of platform that these folks have, like in general, like we'd love, like right now, for instance, like scientists to have those platforms, right? Or so it just like there was something critical about that I was sort of interested in. And something about like thinking about kids performing those speeches, which are often about sort of the problems of their futures in different ways. Oh
my gosh, especially the first speech, the Sally Field. That's the Sally Field speech. I just keep thinking about how she says, "You like me," and I can feel it. Like how she just keeps repeating that, and she's a child. It is so prophetic. It's so, and she's a female child, so it's really profound. It's really
it was a bit of a different way of working, just in like I had sort of an idea. I started to think about how I was going to do it. I originally thought, I'll just have the kids like perform it for their iPhones, basically. And then I was speaking with this former student, longtime friend, Jason Hanasick, about it, and he's like, "Oh, you should let me film it." He's an artist who became a documentary filmmaker. The SFArtsED players were in the midst of a production, and so we had access to a stage and kind of the kids all at one time. So it really just kind of came together around kind of the limitations of like, I have the kids for a certain period of time, I have them in this space. If I'd gone out and made this piece in like a perfect scenario, I probably would have made it differently. But I was interested in all those like restraints in a certain respect. Like the kids kind of learned the speeches really quickly. I was interested in like
Yeah.
the flaws that happened during them giving the
Yeah.
speeches.
Uh-huh.
It's where the idea of like the idea of the piece being called rehearsal kind of came in. Like, I mean, they are kind of rehearsing in a certain respect for like
Yeah.
these careers as actors that will come later on. So all of that was like in the mix, but I didn't really have enough time to think through like all of these things that kind of come through the making, which was sort
Yeah.
of, even though it was like really planned and organized and sort of thought through, and I had these speeches, like I was still interested in all the weird slippages that happen
Yeah.
in the process of making, which is always where a lot of the great parts of art making are basically.
Absolutely.
It's like in the things you can't plan for, not, it's in the discovery and the process, I
Yeah.
guess. Um,
These kids are amazing. They are amazing. Yeah.
and so it wasn't until, like the first kid like started, and everyone who was there was just turning to each other like, oh my God.
So
Can
amazing.
you believe how good that, sort of was just like, we were just like awestruck.
You can see the training. I mean, those kid actors that are part of SFArtsED they always blow me away.
For sure.
Yeah.
So now it's your turn to talk about your piece a bit. The piece,
Yeah.
I mean, I think about the drawings that you're making in lots of different ways in terms of how they're creating their own kind of space.
Mm-hmm.
The piece has a bit, like it feels like a certain kind of space, and
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I have sort of like ideas about it, but I mean, it seems like it was a piece that was chosen for the show in a certain kind of way, or I don't know if it was made for the show.
It wasn't. It wasn't made for the show. I made it last year, last May. Yeah, I mean, I definitely was trying to create or try to relay kind of an imagined space that you can kind of enter into.
I mean, it feels like a kind of room that you could kind of get trapped in,
Hmm.
um, in a certain kind of way, and not in a necessarily unpleasant way. So maybe I was like, it's a refuge, it's a prison, it's like it's I don't know.
Yeah. Well, definitely thinking about drawing an installation and thinking about smoke and how, you could try to draw, or how I could try to draw this space that would be totally, really challenging to create this installation. But that's really what my drawings are about, like drawing these pieces that I would eventually love to make into installations. I mean, that was the way I've worked for a long time, creating
Yeah.
these really labor intensive installation pieces that were temporary. So thinking about color and smoke and, these kind of ephemeral structures you could
It's
kind of
funny
walk through.
because I was in a totally in a somewhat unrelated way. I thought about a piece that you made, a sculpture that you made earlier on, and I don't know how early it was, when I think you were in residence at the Kohler Center.
Mm-hmm.
Made a sink. It was like this
Oh,
kind
yeah.
of this vortex sink.
Uh-huh.
Um,
Still have that sink.
um,
Yeah, out of
which
cast iron.
which also, I mean, there was something like there's something related in the drawings where there's a kind of concreteness, but also like this sort of sense of like an eternal kind of space. Like if you go into that vortex of that sink, like you end up elsewhere basically.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I'm curious about what you said about the drawings actually, in terms of like them being like perspective installations.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, are some of them also like, it seems like one of the benefits of making drawings is you could also make sort of like impossible installations.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's really what, I really have just kind of fallen for drawing. I think a couple of years ago, I realized like, oh, I can't make these installations right now, but I can draw them. And so I just really have I dove into that just kind of trying to create these imagined spaces. And also thinking about interior spaces, like what you're saying, like what's inside of yourself when you close your eyes and you are suspended from time. Like, how do you enter into that space? How do you relay that space in a drawing? I think that's really, it's kind of one of the questions I ask myself every time I sit down to draw. How do I reflect that space?
Can you talk about teaching? Is it like how it relates to your thinking about making work, being an artist?
I mean, I think whatever I'm doing in my studio, I definitely bring into the classroom. So whatever I'm looking at, I try to bring that with me, and because I'm most excited about that. So I think that kind of excitement can be contagious. I think if it's presented to you, I think I really got excited about teaching at CCA. I think when I started at CCA in the first year program, I was just really blown away that I just kind of fell in love with the whole thing, with art school, with teaching, the idea of that being a career. It just seemed really amazing to me. I never thought that I would end up teaching there, but.
And even while you were in grad school, you didn't think that you didn't necessarily.
I thought about it more in grad school, but not in undergrad so much.
And is it something about working with those? So the first year program are freshmen, basically. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it something about working with those particular kids?
Yeah, I think
young
it's
people.
Everything's so new and everything's so exciting at that point. Paper mache or felt making or, fiber sculpture, like it just never occurs to them that, oh, you could make a sculpture out of that, or recycled materials. So.
Right. And they're kind of unjaded a little bit, at least about maybe that kind of material reality, if not other parts of their life.
Yeah, and I think they really appreciate it. I think because so much of their lives are based in the digital reality, working with their hands is really special for them.
Yeah. I wonder, that must be that sort of joy you describe must be part of the thing that happens for people that really like teaching it. I mean, for me, it happened with those third graders. Every time I taught, intro college classes later on, I would always talk about how, I basically taught the same curriculum to third graders that I'm teaching to you now, freshmen, college students.
Yeah.
And
I mean, with SFArtsED, yeah. It's true. I did the same, teaching third graders, some of the same projects that I would teach at a college level.
Yeah.
Some occasions, like making shoes out of cardboard or.
The kids that I was teaching initially, and this was before SFArtsED, they were working in a darkroom and they were shooting with manual cameras, and most of them were developing their own film. The third graders, their hands would be a little too small to do this with chemistry, and some of them anyway. But more importantly than all of the mechanics of picture making is just the sort of unencumbered seeing, and the unencumbered embracing of the process of making that. It's harder the longer you do it. Even the difference between the third graders and the fifth graders. The fifth graders were like, after having 3 years of art making and picture making, they were pretty savvy about it already by fifth grade. But the third graders made pictures that were just like nothing I'd ever seen before.
Yeah.
And certainly nothing I could make myself. I had an old teacher that would talked about in the beginning classes that he taught, which I was a student in. He said, really what you have to do is you have to empty your cup of everything about what a good picture is. And that cup has been basically filled up for your entire life. And, we all have that about like what good art is, basically.
Yeah.
And to some degree, like we all have to empty that cup in order to make anything.